You're listening to the Straight Fire Podcast, hosted by me, Benjamin Anderson, my brother, Noah Anderson, and our good friend, Landon Averett. We hope you take this opportunity to support the podcast in whatever way possible, and we hope you enjoy this episode of the Straight Fire Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back into another Straight Fire Podcast episode. It is a joy to have you wherever you are listening from. We just want to encourage you to take this opportunity to support the podcast in any way possible, as I echo past Benjamin there from the intro. But yeah, just thank you guys for all the support you guys show us and your continuance in, is that a word?
Continuation
In supporting each episode that we put out. As frantic as our upload schedule is,
frantically awesome, if you ask me.
I just think that you should be blessed. Like, think about your favorite, music artist. Do they announce when they're going to drop a new album? No, it just appears one day. They probably do, but
I think they announce it. They announce it a little bit.
Imagine,
I'm tracking.
Yeah, it's just like, instead of just like, is a blessing really a blessing if you know it's coming?
Be ready always.
Yeah,
you never know.
This is just a little blessing. It's just dropped into your podcast feed. By the way, be sure to follow the Straight Fire Podcast wherever you get podcasts, so you can be notified when that little blessing just appears. I mean, how great is? Even I get a kick out of seeing the Straight Fire
Podcast
Podcast
going off at Friday night at 3 a.m.
Listen, man, I got deep into editing that one. Why is I get a kick out of seeing the Straight Fire Podcast uploaded a new episode. Oh, look, the title's spelled wrong.
I'm still not subscribed, I don't think.
What?
I'm following on podcasts, but I don't know if I'm subscribed.
I'm subscribed to the YouTube channel. Because I know as I scroll past my own video every time.
I want to be like the...
But I live the video. I don't have to watch it.
I want to be the 1 millionth subscriber.
1 millionth is bold, considering we put out an episode every 3 weeks.
I will be the 1 millionth subscriber.
Hey, never mind. I am subscribed.
Hey! Everyone be like Landon of the Straight Fire Podcast and subscribe to the podcast
subscribe on
to your own
channel.
YouTube.
That's right.
All right, with that being said, and with all the niceties out of the way.
Oh, I just wanted to add really quick. Been getting a lot of good support on the podcast, especially some of the last podcasts. So
have you really?
Yeah.
Oh man, I would love if people sent that my way.
Everybody,
you did great.
Oh, thanks, man.
Everybody, keep up the good work.
Yeah.
Whenever you feel like uploading.
Whenever we feel like.
Wait, are you talking to us?
No, I'm talking to everyone. But mainly you, because you upload.
Yeah, that's true. I do upload. I'm going to try to upload more. I'm on summer break, so.
Famous.
I feel like we heard that. Someone go pull up the podcast where he said that.
I think we need to pull up every single podcast where I said, yeah, I'm going to upload more. That might be the first YouTube video on the channel is me looking at every single podcast and saying we're going to upload more. I think that's what I'm going to do.
Compilation.
I would say
Benjamin, the compilation of Benjamin promising he's going to upload more episodes.
And then it shows the upload
But then so I post that video, and then after that, you just see video after video after video after video. By the way, send us and comment ideas of YouTube videos you would like us to make, like legitimate YouTube videos. Because
not podcasts.
Not podcasts. But if you have podcast topics too, we're taking those as well.
Taking everything.
Send us any ideas you may have.
Collection is getting small, so we need more ideas.
We need some more ideas.
Our collection of ideas?
Yes.
Oh no, I've got unlimited.
Good ideas. Our collection is running. We're running.
It's running low.
All right, we're changing the topic. I'm calling an audible. Everybody turn to Revelation.
Oh man.
Revelation chapter 14.
What's that even about?
The woman and the dragon?
No, it's 12, I think.
Hold on.
If it's the woman and the dragon, I'm going to stand up and cheer. Come on. Be right, Benjamin. Be right.
No, it's the lamb and the 144,000.
Oh, get it?
144. 12, the woman, the child, and the dragon.
Yeah.
Hey, guess who gets the star for this episode?
Hey, one way to remember Revelation, what's in Revelation chapter 14, the first, the 144,000, right?
That's the thing at the beginning. You can, I think there's some other stuff in there, but
yeah. So Noah, why don't you go and read the first passage for us as we kick this podcast off?
Okay, Daniel chapter 1. Everybody turn over there.
All right, that is what we're going to be talking about today. Daniel chapter 1.
Oh man, I was excited for Revelation.
Maybe another time. Don't tease that, Landon.
I'll say, do not tease that.
Yeah, do not tease that.
That was not a teaser.
I will have to lock myself in my bedroom as I study, just crying. What does John mean?
That's true. What is happening?
What did the dragon do?
Peter talked about that Paul wrote some things that were hard to understand.
Clearly,
he had got a hold of Revelation.
I'll say, I don't think Peter. I don't know. John obviously outlived all the apostles, so Peter couldn't have known. But if he did,
get to heaven, Peter. Man, I got something for you to read. Check this out.
Oh man, that would be good.
iPad. No, I'll just here. Take this.
So yeah, we're going to be reading Daniel, which Daniel also has some interesting prophecies in it. We are going to be discussing though Daniel chapter 1, and I think it's very relevant as we find ourselves as Christians in a world that is growing farther and farther away from Christianity. I remember talking about and making the point of where is it that Christians are called foreigners? Just pilgrims passing through. I believe it's in First Peter.
First Peter.
Where First Peter calls us, pilgrims and sojourners, right? And just think about, people in a foreign land, like, you probably have never heard it on the podcast, but we went to the Philippines.
They've probably never heard that.
Probably never brought that up. But, when we were in the Philippines, think about how much we stood out from everyone there, right? We didn't speak the language. We didn't look like the people. We were clearly foreigners. Think about how much foreigners, right, stand out. And then, as we think about Peter calling Christians to be foreigners, how much we are supposed to stand out. And then we kind of transition to this idea of Daniel, how much Daniel and his friends would have stood out because of not only, if they look different, but the different customs that they had, right? And we're going to get into that as we kind of start this idea and how Daniel and his friends, even in a foreign country, even with everything being taken away from them, still holding fast to the values that God had set for his people.
And I've got that passage really quickly.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
And it says in 1 Peter 2, verse 11, it says, "Beloved, I beg you, as sojourners and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul."
Yeah, and just think about how much that applies to Daniel as he tries to, separate himself as a sojourner from the people of Babylon. So with that being said, do you all have anything you want to say before we start the podcast, or we started the podcast before we start reading
the passage?
Yeah, before we start. Thanks, Landon. Before we start reading, or so we're going to get into it. All right. In the third year, picking up in Daniel 1:1, in the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, with some of the articles of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar to the house of his God. And he brought the articles into the treasure house of his God. The king instructed Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, to bring some of the children of Israel and some of the king's descendants and some of the nobles, young men in whom there were no blemish, but good-looking, gifted in all wisdom, possessing knowledge and quick to understand, who had the ability to serve the king in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the language and the literature of the Chaldeans. So just real quickly before we get into it, I would just like to say, if America was taken, if we were taken away into captivity, and the king needed to set aside some good-looking men who understood, who had good understanding of things. I see the qualifications right here in this room.
Oh, brother.
I'm kidding.
Someone must have just walked in the room.
Yeah,
I was like,
no, I'm kidding. I just, first off, what an honor to be chosen. But secondly, what a horror to be chosen, right? Think about, Daniel, and now he can't even live with the people he came with, but he has to live his life in constant service to this king whom he just captured and besieged and captured his city. Think about how, perhaps Daniel just felt lucky to, have food and to have shelter in this time. But think about how hard that would have been for Daniel as he not only leaves everything he's known, but is specifically chosen, hey, we're going to indoctrinate you with the teachings of the Chaldeans, right? What a hard life. And, Daniel couldn't have been very old. I would imagine when this started. I always imagined Daniel as, because I believe I remember hearing 16 or 17.
Yeah, I think traditionally he was a younger man at this point.
Well, because he still had to be taught the language and everything. So, it's harder to teach someone the older they become a new language and new customs.
He was, if I remember right, he was in Babylon for, I think 70 years? I think he was in the whole time of captivity.
Yeah.
So he was... I know, I don't know, I'm not 100% on that number, but I do know by the time Daniel did die, he was extremely old, having been in Babylon for a very long time.
Yeah.
Which means he would have come into Babylon at a very, very young age.
Yeah, and now his life, so basically, against his will, he's being signed up saying, hey, you're going to serve the king for the rest of your life. You know, and there's things to be grateful for, right? But there's also things that I'm sure he wished he could have, you know, would have been different. And so we get into this idea of Daniel has these gifts, right? And y'all just comment when I guess y'all just think of what you want to say after this quick thought. But Daniel had these gifts, he had these abilities, and later we're going to read that he used them to point back to God, right? Not to serve himself. What do y'all think of this passage so far?
I think it's always fascinating to me to look at how young the king picked out good men, knowing, right, that if you really want people who are going to serve you well, train them when they're young. And I know that's probably not the main point and focus of this passage, but it is very interesting to note how young Daniel is when he does make all of these decisions that he's about to make. And he had gone through some serious life changes. I mean, he had lost his friends and family, right? Whether they had been killed in the siege, whether they had been left behind in Babylon. Either way, he's not seeing them again. Or were left behind in Israel and Judah. But either way, he's not seeing them again. Right, he probably would never. I mean, based on all the records that we have, he probably never saw his family again. Right, even if they were in Babylon, Daniel spent all his time in service to the king. He would never start his own family. He would never know the joy of starting his own family or doing anything in relation to that. Right, Daniel's sole purpose in this country was to serve this foreign king. Right, and we see how difficult that must have been for him. I don't think we as Americans, hopefully, can ever fully understand what a challenge this must have been. So I think when we look through the challenges of Daniel's life, you have to premise that, hey, these challenges are difficult to overcome on their own, but the stuff that he is already overcoming is so much greater than anything that we can imagine. Right? So it just goes to show that Daniel had such a trust in God. I mean, he had nothing else.
Yeah.
He had no family to trust in. He had no future family to trust in. He had his friends there, but what could they do against the king? Right? So Daniel really started from nothing. And that was the goal of the king. The goal of the king was to completely break Daniel down, to strip away all of his identity, everything that made this Jewish man Daniel, right? Everything that made Daniel, take all of that away and simply repurpose him for complete service for the king. And Daniel refused to bow down. He refused to give in to that. And I think one of the lessons for us is that's exactly what the world is going to do. They're going to try to strip you completely of your identity, to push you away from everything that you know and are familiar with, and force you to make wrong decisions, right? But when that time comes, we have to follow the example of Daniel, because it is going to happen.
Yeah, I agree. Landon, would you add to that?
You know, there's a lot of passages in Daniel that show how unwise Nebuchadnezzar was in certain areas. Passages like this show the flip side of that and some of the smartest decisions he made. And so when he came and he conquered Judah, what he knew is that there was going to be certain people that he could extract that would benefit him. And y'all have covered that. But what this shows is you're going ahead and getting a glimpse of outer characteristics of Daniel. Because what you read in verse 4, okay, he's young. Okay, so what he's looking for, and when you see it, it's throughout history, but even in the Old Testament, the guys that really took leadership roles and conquered that position, not even like in a bad way, but like took control of that position and did well with it, they were young. I mean, you think of David when he took the throne. Saul was a young man when he took the throne. Solomon, at his peak, was the young man. He got worse as he got older. You think of guys like Hezekiah. All of these guys were young guys that took the throne. You come into rather recent history, Alexander the Great. I mean, that was a young guy that conquered the world. And so what he knew is he needed people that had qualities in which they knew what needed to be done and they would do it.
Yeah.
And that's what he needed. And so he looked for that. He also looked for people that the older you get, the more stuck in your ways you are. And like you said, Noah said, you want to be able to break these boys down. And so he needed young ones that didn't have this foundation that the 50, 40, 60-year-old guys had. And so what he had to do is he had to take these guys that hadn't been Jews for decades and were not solidified in that faith to the point that others were. And so he'd break that down. But we see that he wasn't just young. We see that he was, without blemish. And that's going to be explained. What does that mean, without blemish? That can mean a lot of things. Okay, he's good looking. He's gifted in all wisdom. He possesses knowledge. He's quick to understand. He's a smart guy, first off.
Man, this sounds like people talking about me.
No, yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I was just,
Sure, I
I'm
knew
just
it.
wondering how many times I could make that joke.
I looked at your
I might
face
have
and
one.
it was
I might have
coming.
one more in me. We'll see.
I know you have at least one more. But it's that the ability to serve in the king's palace. And so what he's looking for is he wants intelligence, he wants wisdom, but he also wants a physical appeal. Okay, so he wants these guys that are going to help him lead the country in some shape, form, or fashion. To be people that can be looked to, guys that can be looked to, and people can say that is a smart, that is a wise, that is a good-looking man. And it's interesting that he did not look for that in Babylon. He looked for that somewhere else. Now that probably has to do now. Realistically, every place he conquered, did he probably do this to some extent? Probably. So we're not going to say that it was just that he was looking at the people in Judah and like, man, these are the best guys that you're ever going to see. But there was something that he could look at Judah and say, I can find these guys in Judah. And what you find is that it's David, or Daniel rather. The only other thing that I want to say, and then we move on, is this kind of reminds me of the opposite effect of what happened with Jonah. So you have God tell Jonah, and we've talked about Jonah before on this podcast, I want you to go to Assyria and I want you to preach these people repentance or I'm going to wipe them out. Okay, we talk about why did Jonah struggle with that? Everyone always just says because Assyria was a nasty nation that did terrible things to people that went against the rule. I think there's validity to that. But I think equally important to that is what had been prophesied by other prophets like Hosea and Nahum and all of these other guys. What had they been preaching to the people of Israel for years? If you don't repent, there's going to be a nation that comes and wipes us out, which is Assyria. And so here you have this guy that knows that his people is about to die, and God tells him, you're going to go to the people that are about to conquer you, and you're going to do the right thing. You're going to preach repentance to them. You're going to be a good person. You're going to be the right kind of person that I need you to be. Did he do that right thing at first? No. Okay, we flip that to Daniel. The exact same thing happened, but rather worse, because it wasn't Daniel going to Babylon before Judah got conquered, but rather after. And so they're both presented with this problem of you're dominated by another nation, and God has put you in this position. Because what does it say in verse 1 or verse 2? God gave Judah into the hand of Babylon. So basically, God has put Daniel into this position. And so here is Daniel in a place that he never thought he would be, and he's presented with, do I follow God and do I do the right thing? Do I become the man that Nebuchadnezzar's looking for, or do I just be a problem the whole time?
Yeah.
And then you're going to see what he decides throughout the chapter.
Yeah, and well, I'll just get into what the chapter says. No, unless you have something to add before we. Also, that reminds me. I think what Nebuchadnezzar was doing was, to me, it's always felt like a political flex, right? Like to take the young men, to force them into servitude, right? From every nation.
best, too.
Yeah. Like, hey, look at I only have the best from every nation, serving me, right? And their only focus will be to serve me. That is how powerful that I am. I think it's like a political move.
Yeah, and he's also, I don't know how related this is to the passage, but he's also crippling all the future nations. Like, Judah has, in his eyes anyway, has no chance of revolting against him because he's taken the best of the best. He's taken all the
true.
leaders.
Yeah,
He's
I didn't think
taken all
about
the
that.
people who would be future soldiers, right? All these young men. He's taken them, and now they work completely for him, right? They will never see their home countries ever again,
Yeah.
right? So he's taken these people, and he has essentially humbled those countries to a point that they won't recover for generations.
I mean, the assumption is that he did this to everyone. And I mean, what did he take? He took the king's sons. He took the noblemen's sons. He took the wise people.
Yeah.
I mean, he took the good-looking guys, the charismatic guys, and the guys that held any sort of power in the future.
The guys you would follow.
Any of the people there's like, if he leads a revolt, I'll follow him. All of those guys, they're on my side now.
Yeah.
That's very true. Picking up in verse 5. And the king appointed for them daily provisions of the king's delicacies and of the wine which he drank, and 3 years of training for them, so at the end of that time they might serve before the king. Now those among the sons of Judah were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. To them the chief of eunuch gave names. He gave Daniel the name Belteshazzar, to Hanani, Shadrach, to Mishael, Meshach, and to Azariah, Abednego.
Abednego.
It's always said Abednego, but
It's not I remember realizing that. It's not
like
Abednego, it's Abednego.
it's Abednego.
Abednego.
You know what I think is also equally funny
Abednego.
to that?
Abednego.
The fact that we called those three guys by their Babylonian name, but we kept Daniel as his.
I was listening to a lesson, and the preacher was like, "Don't you think what is it? Don't you think Shadrach, Meshach? Don't you think? Let's see. Don't you think Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah would have liked to have been known by their Judean names? Hey, Landon, we're gonna refer to you by the name you got captured by, not your given name
for all of history.
Yeah,
You're just this guy.
That's it, man. Yeah, you're right. I haven't.
Which I guess that identity, not like the heart wasn't lost, but
Yeah.
that identity
Hey,
probably
Landon,
was.
you remember when you like got forced into prison and they give you that jail number, like 0996? Yeah, that's what we're gonna call you now. Not Landon, but
Part of it also it's the book of Daniel, right? It's not the book of
You mean
Shadrach.
the book of Belteshazzar?
Yeah, not the book of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
that'd be really weird. That'd be really weird.
Could you
to
imagine
read.
getting up to preach a sermon? Now open your Bibles to Belteshazzar. Chapter
But I mean, if it had been that, you'd probably man calling that book Daniel would be really weird too.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I guess probably just to preserve the Jewish name. It was one of
Yeah.
the books of prophecy, all that stuff.
And nobody's gonna name their kid Belteshazzar.
I might.
Oh, okay.
No, never mind. No, I don't think that'll fly.
You don't think
Okay.
that'll fly?
We're all gonna try and use their Jewish names the rest of the podcast.
Okay, let's
Okay.
see. We have.
Hananiah, Mishael.
Well, this is- I think this is the only time they're gonna be mentioned, yeah.
The rest of it's about Daniel.
But we're gonna talk about them and mention them,
Okay,
and
so
we're gonna use it.
Look at the
Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. I can do that.
We're gonna lock it.
Okay, yeah.
Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah.
I guarantee you, I'll
can
break
we
it
can
first.
we go ahead and read? I think you read through verse 7. You want to go ahead and read through verse 10?
Yes, but Daniel purposed in his heart he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the chief of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now God had brought Daniel into favor and goodwill of the chief of the eunuchs, and the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear the Lord King who has appointed your food and drink. For why should he see your faces looking worse than the young men who are your age? Then you would endanger my head before the king. So I guess looking back over what we read, right, we've determined that we are going to talk about Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah with their Jewish names. But then this kind of the crux of this passage, right? Daniel purposing in his heart to not be defiled by the food that the king would eat. Do y'all have any idea of like what the king would have been eating? I assume obviously food that was unclean for the Jews.
Yeah, probably unclean food. Probably, I mean, the wine.
Food
I
with
think also,
meat with blood.
Yeah, that sort of thing. Obviously, Daniel decides whatever it is, and it's interesting that we're not told the food, but Daniel decides whatever it is that he's going to have, and Mishael and Azariah and Hananiah decide that they're going to have no part of it.
Yeah,
right. Something about it goes against their culture, and even though everything, their identity had been stripped from them, they still decided, hey, I'm going to hold on to these principles.
Morals stay.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to take them with me wherever I go, showing that it wasn't really about the location of where they served God. It was more about, God's law being written on their hearts. Right, because that's always what was commanded in Deuteronomy and Exodus and Leviticus. Right, God said, hey, write my law on your hearts.
There you go.
Right. Meditate on them day and night, and not only meditate on them, but do them.
Yeah.
Right. And Daniel decided he was going to take that seriously. Right. And you can see what ensues.
Yeah, and that as I was preparing for this podcast, that kind of made me reflect. Made me reflect on this idea of, how many times have I given myself a pass whether, hey, I watched something that I wouldn't normally watch, or, I did something that I wouldn't normally do. Well, because I was with other people, right? I would never have put on that TV show. I would never have listened to that music. I would have never have said that joke. But, I'm with, those other people around me who are doing those things. That's really more on them than it is me. It's not really my fault that I listen to those things or I watch those things. It's on them. And I thought about how many times, I've given myself a pass because I let the circumstances around me decide how much I was going to follow God's law, God's commands that day. And, I realized Daniel kind of puts me to shame here. Daniel puts to shame this idea of, because I'm with these people, I'm going to do these things. Daniel puts to shame the idea that, my my morals can come and go depending on my surroundings, right? And I think it's so easy to fall into that mindset. And because sometimes, let's be honest, we fool ourselves into thinking that the worldly people around us are going to respect the morals that we have. And that's not always true. And I'm not trying to cast a judgment. I'm not trying to cast blame on people, but they're just simply not going to understand, right? No, I don't know if non-Christians can understand the idea that, you have to cling to these morals, because it's not just about, holding to some moral code. It's about serving your creator. And I think that's the idea that Daniel's giving here. It's not just the idea of, hey, I'm not eating this because I want to be healthier, or because it violates, how I feel about this. I'm not eating this because I'm trying to serve my God, right? There's nothing more important than that. Even in service of this great king, my focus still remains on serving this God. I'm not going to let the thing around me, even this, these wonderful delicacies. I mean, it says, the wine that the king drank. You don't think the king drank the best? The food that the king ate. You don't think the king ate the best? And it was still, hey, no, I'm going to forego that, because no matter what, no matter who's around me, my life remains still in service to my God. And so Daniel kind of put me to shame with that idea.
I think an important thought here is not only to follow God's commandments, but to also explain why you do them, right? If someone comes up to me, hey, no, why don't you drink, right? Well, I could just say, well, I think drinking could cause me to do things that I don't really feel comfortable in doing. I think drinking could impair my decision making, all that stuff. That's a fair response. It's a valid response. But a more appropriate response for Christians would be to first say, God has told us that, hey, if we drink, we cannot inherit eternal life, right? As Christians, we are not allowed to drink, right? The Bible instructs us against that, right? To really explain that to them, because people get confused, I think, when people in the world think of authority, right? They just think of, hey, I'm not going to do something for fear of repercussion. Right. So when I get into a situation with my friends and they they're not Christians, right? Well, they're like, well, you can go against the Bible now, right? We're not going to get on to you or anything like that. We're not going to tell anyone. And they don't understand that this law is not a fear of repercussions. It is out of a love of God, right? And that's something that Daniel absolutely had. He wasn't afraid of the repercussions of the king. If you read through the rest of the book of Daniel, you can absolutely see he wasn't afraid to get punished, right? He did these things because of how much he loved God and still loved him despite being captured by the Assyrians, despite having everything he loved taken away from him, right? Daniel loved God enough to serve him no matter what the repercussions were going to be, and he showed everyone around him that his faith was not something that he took part of because he was scared to be punished.
Yeah.
Right. It was something he took part of because he truly loved God and wanted to serve him.
Yeah, Landon, would you add on?
Yeah, no, just first adding on to what Noah said, and then I'll give my thought. I think sometimes we get put in a position where we can either fall to temptation or not, and it's something that can come by peer pressure of other people or them maybe not on purpose doing that. But our responses are very flaky. Like, hey, Landon, do you want to drink this? No, I'm not old enough to drink, or no, I'm just not comfortable with drinking. Is that a valid response? Well, yeah. Is that the response I should have as a Christian? No. Landon, why don't you curse? No one's gonna deal with that. Well, I'm just not comfortable with cursing. Is that a valid response? Well, yes. Is that the right one to have as a Christian? No. If you're gonna hold to a standard that God holds you to, you need to be at least in this instant, as Daniel, you need to be man enough to admit that. Okay, here you have Daniel and his friends here, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, right? Bingo. Okay, these guys, they have a moral compass. They have a moral standard. They're offered a scenario where they couldn't or where they didn't want to do this, and they just straight up said, hey, no, I don't want to do this. They could have been like, I don't feel comfortable with this, but I'm also not comfortable with, saying something. Because what they're addressing, they're going straight against the king. I mean, this isn't just something like, hey, you guys should eat this. This is the king's orders. You are to eat this so that you can gain your strength. He doesn't want a bunch of weak guys helping him run his kingdom. He wants men of strength. And so here they are opposing the king. They could have just been like, not this one time. But they were man enough to hold to the moral standard that they had at home. They're going to hold it here too. Mm-hmm. And so really the question, the word that I would use here is compromise. They have a standard with which they know they're to follow. Okay, I don't know what was broken by what the king gave them. I don't know if it was the type of meat from the animal that it came from that went against their conscience or went against Jewish law. You go read Leviticus. There's a lot of things, a lot of meat that they couldn't have. I don't know if it's what they used to cook it. I don't know if it's how they cooked it. I don't know if they left the blood in it. I don't know if it was the drink. Maybe it was alcoholic wine. You see how alcohol would affect Nebuchadnezzar's family later in Daniel. So maybe that was just something that he was already given to his men because it was a normal thing. I don't know what it was that they looked at the meal and said that this goes against what we believe to be right. And so the question was, do I compromise? Okay, well, what are the pros and cons to this? I do this and nothing changes physically. I'm obeying the king. I'm obeying the guy that's in charge of me. I'm actually gaining strength. I'm going to be able to do what I'm supposed to do. And God has allowed me to come in this situation, meaning he wants me to be here. So that means I need to do everything to keep in favor with the king. Could you not use all of those things as a way to compromise going against that standard? But rather what you see Daniel do is he says, I have a standard, and so does the other guys. We have a standard, and we're not going to break it. What happens if we break it? What could have possibly happened? The eunuch goes to the king and says, "These four are not listening. Kill them."
Yeah.
It could have It could have stopped at the eunuch and not made it to the king. We don't want to eat this. Well, you're going to eat it, or you're going to be dead.
Yeah.
And when eventually they would be, three of them would be handed that very situation. You're either going to do what I tell you to do, or you're going to die. It could have happened right in chapter 1 instead of happening chapters later. Okay, and so there's a lot of things that they could have went through. What could have happened is they decided, all right, you're not going to eat this, you're not going to eat anything. You're just going to eventually starve. There's a lot of bad things that could have happened that they could have gotten out of with compromise. I'm just going to compromise on my standard.
Well, also think about what the chief eunuch says to Daniel. Hey, I don't want to risk the king killing me because you guys didn't eat the food that he gave you. If you're Daniel, you could just go back to
Well, I got to keep him. I don't want to put anyone else in there.
Hananiah, Mishael, and
Azariah.
Yeah.
Doing
You
good.
could go back to them and be like, "Oh, guys, we don't want to put the chief of the eunuchs in danger. I mean, he's been kind to us. He's been nice to us, right? It says Daniel had favor with the chief of the eunuchs, and guys, we don't want to put this guy in danger. But that's not what Daniel does. Even though again, he had the easy opportunity to compromise.
And we have that in our life too. I think one of the biggest ones that everyone has this one is lying. There is going to come a point where you're going to be like, man, like it's wrong. Okay, it goes against my standard of what I believe to be right. Lying is wrong, always. That's just the truth. Lying is wrong. There's no such thing as a white lie. I'm either telling the truth or I'm not, and you're going to be on one of the two sides of that. But I mean, if I just tell this lie, it'll get me out of trouble. It could put me in a better situation. I don't want to hurt people.
Yeah.
You want to talk about like Christians that want to defend lying in certain scenarios. The main thing that they're going to use that for is I just want to defend someone else. Here you have Daniel rather. I'm gonna keep saying that, aren't I? You have Daniel rather.
Landon can say, Mishael, Azariah, and
You cannot say Daniel.
the other one. Oh no, Hananiah. But he's gonna call Daniel David.
And he could have said, I want to defend this guy. This would just be better. I'm gonna compromise here and I'll fix it later. But you don't see that because when you compromise once, what happens is it'll be easier to compromise later. I don't know what it was that he's coming on. If it was drinking an alcoholic beverage, I do it this one time. I mean, God knows that I'm doing this for the betterment of me, these guys, for the eunuch. But that's not what he said. He said, this is what I know I need to do, and I don't care how it affects anything physically. Spiritually is what matters. And I think that's one of the hardest things for me to, I don't want to say admit, but to teach is, we talk about selfishness, and it is always wrong. The only thing that you can take that term and put it with and it be true is there should be nothing that you wouldn't do to protect your soul. That is the most important. And so in that sense, you should be very selfish when it comes to your soul.
Yeah,
That's it. And so above all else, you protect your soul above anyone else. And you have to do that because if you can't protect your soul, how are you to protect anyone else's? And Daniel, I said it right, and Daniel understood that I have to keep myself in the right relationship with God to change anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something I noticed as well, is if you're looking for excuses, your excuses will always outnumber the reason to do good, right? I can think of hundreds of excuses to do the wrong thing, right? And when you're looking for them, they're easy to find, right? But we see Daniel wasn't looking for excuses. He wasn't looking for a way out, right? He was simply ready to do the right thing. He didn't consider, obviously we don't know everything that Daniel was going through, but we know he did do the right thing, right? And it looks like Daniel Daniel, I'm sure Daniel had a long talk with himself on the way to Babylon when he got to the king's palace. Hey, we're going to do the right thing here no matter what.
Yeah.
Right. And they were faced with this first test, and we see that they decided, hey, even at the risk of our own lives, even at the risk of someone else's life, they were going to follow the code, which is a bold way to start, because they had nothing. They had no rights. Don't picture yourself Daniel, this older man who was very wise, who had worked his way up in favor with the king. Daniel had nothing. He had no reason to, like Landon said, he had no reason to be respected, no reason to be listened to, right? They could have said, okay, you want to eat the food? Fine. Then we'll throw you out of our palace and you'll have to find your own way.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not like we don't have 40 other guys that are going to do
That's
this.
what I was thinking about. There's other people who are here.
We've taken people from every nation. What makes you special? But I will note very quickly that the person in charge of them found favor. Daniel had found favor in his eyes. Right. So when you're doing the right thing, when you're being a Christian, instead of when you say to someone, yeah, hey, I don't do that because I follow God, instead of them mocking you, I think a lot of the time, if you are being a faithful Christian, they'll look at you and wonder, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
You know, why why do you do that
I
now?
think we all have this in our head that like the second that we go against something that they're going to be like, oh, gross, you're a Christian.
you're a
I can't
Christian.
believe you're a
Realistically,
Christian.
almost every time that someone has offered me something with which I'm not okay to partake in, and I'm honest with them, they're like, you know,
Yeah,
that's cool. Honestly,
don't compromise.
Usually they'll be like, yeah, I need to stop too. I just
Yeah,
Yeah.
don't compromise on it. And that's a great conversation start. Now, will it always be that way? No, probably not.
absolutely not.
Right. I've had some conversations with some people about abortion and that sort of thing, and I explained my views and why I had those views, and they're like, "Huh, that's interesting." Now, did they ridicule me for them? Yeah, a little bit. But you know what? I told them and I explained, and who knows what that'll lead to in the future. But because I presented them in a Christian way and wasn't I wasn't a rebellious person. I wasn't someone who was always looking for controversy. But instead, since I simply followed God, right, and they knew that about me, then telling people why I'm doing what I'm doing is so much easier, right? And Daniel, because of the person that he was, when he told the keeper of the eunuchs, hey, this is why, or this is what I need, and I can't do what you're asking me to do, the eunuch didn't just kick him out because Daniel and his friends had been rebellious, right? Daniel had already found that favor, so the eunuch was more willing to do what Daniel had asked of him.
Yeah. I think we should go ahead and move on to the next passage. I think we covered that really well. So picking up in verse 11. So Daniel said to the steward of whom, hold on, I can do this. We're picking up in verse 11.
I believe he made fun of me with David.
I know, you're right. I don't know why I had any room to
You
talk.
want me to read it?
No, I got it. So Daniel said to the steward, whom the chief of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Oh, there are the names again. Yeah. Verse 12, please test your servants for 10 days and let them give us vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our appearance be examined before you and the appearance of the young men who eat the portion of the king's delicacies as you see fit. So deal with your servants. So he consented with them in this matter and tested them 10 days. And at the end of 10 days, their features appeared better and fatter in the flesh than all the young men who ate the portion of the king's delicacies. Thus the steward took away their portion of delicacies and wine that they were to drink and gave them vegetables. And I've always thought for this passage for so long, the other people in the room had to be so mad. They're like, wait, we're eating vegetables and water? Like, who got punished? Oh, no. We're doing this because it's better for us? Like,
And then they got more fat. Bro, that's like me bulking and then
I think-
eating broccoli.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the worst.
I just got back from the gym. Let me shout out on this broccoli,
I think that's
broccoli
the worst
stock.
punishment you can imagine.
Yeah,
Like,
getting
no.
rid of the wine and the meat and getting fed vegetables and water.
Broccoli, just raw vegetables and water. Oh man, what a
Ooh, can you imagine looking at it and
All
like,
the time. Like,
hey, and that lasted for 10 days. But what happened after that? It continued.
3 years. Yeah, 3 years. Can you imagine that plate that tray gets opened and there's just broccoli?
No,
flicking
and
back to you?
imagine you eat one meal of vegetables. The next night, guess what you have waiting for you? More vegetables.
and water, yeah. I like me some vegetables, but not like that.
I think there had to be some supernatural sustenance. in
I
there
was thinking
somewhere.
that too because I was like, I don't think. I mean,
Now, listen, the people on drinking the meat and wine. I mean, if you're drinking
that
all
can't
the time,
be that
like
healthy
they
for you.
probably
Yeah,
were,
that can't be very healthy for you.
probably not very healthy. But on the flip side, vegetables and water don't possess. Vegetables are mostly water, So they don't possess.
You're just having
all
water,
the
and
you weren't- were we
you're just
getting
having
protein?
water and less good tasting
think it
water.
had to be
possess
miraculous because
nutrients.
of the way
Yeah,
it
it had
was.
to be because the eunuch looks at them like, "Hey, this is crazy. Like,
Yeah.
what are y'all doing?"
Maybe like vegetables and water, and perhaps like bread.
You know, he was like, after 10 days, they're gonna look like me.
They're gonna have shriveled away,
skeletons.
and
Yeah.
everyone understood that would be the case, but they hadn't because God was obviously on their side.
Yeah, and I think that's the key here. And also, we have no indication that Daniel's saying, "Hey, test us for 10 days." There's no indication that Daniel knows what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, actually,
Daniel
like
doesn't have-
do it.
Daniel simply knows if he does
The
the,
same
right
thing-
thing, he'll get taken care
the
of.
same thing with what Ahaziah, Mishael, and Hananiah
Azariah.
Azariah, dang. Tell King Nebuchadnezzar in chapter 3, we have no need to answer you in this matter. We're going to do what our God tells us to, whether he saves us or not, right? I think that's what Daniel's mindset here. In fact, that mindset of, hey, we're going to do the right thing, whether God, saves us or not, that kind of sums up the book of Daniel. No matter what's happening, I have to do the right thing, whether God delivers me and, grants me a victory or delivers me from my enemies, or whether, the worst case scenario happens, I'm still serving God.
Well, and you see this Daniel is almost a book of flip sides, right? You see Daniel, it works out surprisingly well for Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Azariah, Hananiah, and Mishael.
Wow. Yeah, very good.
Because
Better than I've done.
because God is on their side, and what an example they are to be taken away from their homeland and still serve God. But nowhere in this book is the promise that God is going to save them.
Yeah.
In fact, God does very little speaking in this book, right? Daniel and
Outside of the prophecies, yeah.
yes, Daniel, but through the first 3 chapters, God does very, very little speaking, right? He speaks directly to Daniel, but that's really it, right? He doesn't speak to the 3 of them in the fiery furnace at all, right? Any time in that whole story, right? Except when they are thrown in the furnace and the 4th one comes down like the Son of God, right? But there is no assurance from God here, and God gives no promise that, hey, when things are hard, when you have been taken, or when everything gets hard, that God is going to deliver you from that and make things physically easier for you.
Yeah.
There is no guarantee in this book that that's going to happen, right? In fact, Jesus warned against that often, right? Because we always remember, hey, Daniel, he was saved from the lion's den. They were saved from the fiery furnace. They were fed vegetables and water, and it was made okay, right? But what you don't read about is how hard it was to be in Babylon away from their family, how hard it was to serve the king, right? All that they had already come through, right? And that God was able to continue to give them carry them through such hard times because they had already made the decision that they were going to serve God first. And there is no guarantee to you and me today that that's going to happen, that we're going to, get carried through every trial because we serve God, right? But the example here is shown that, hey, if you put God first, you're going to be taken care of, whether it's in this life or the next. It will always work out for you.
I guess I hadn't thought about, what might have been the hardest thing Daniel and Mishael, Azariah, and Hananiah had to deal with.
There you go.
Yeah, there it is. What I had to deal with was just just day in, day out. Hey, we're not in our homeland. We're so far, and I know we keep going back to this, but it just keeps like dawning on me, like this idea of like every single day, I'm far from my homeland. I don't get to worship my God the way I want to. I don't get to have a family to comfort me. I don't get to be with, all of the people that I grew up with loving. And you don't realize like, day in, day out, how hard that would be. And, especially as those days stack up and then, hey, we get to the point where we have to bow down to this golden statue, right? After years of serving the king faithfully and trying to uphold everything God does, now we have this challenge in front of us. Like, how, let's just, you wonder if they had this idea in their head of, hey, let's just call it. Right? Like I'm done, I'm done taking the ridicule from the other people. I'm done trying to hold on to these rules that this God has left me. Let's just call it. And you wonder, because day in, day out, as we go throughout our lives, and as we go through the valleys of life that life brings, you wonder if it's like, man, maybe I should just call it, right? This temptation that I've been putting off, or this commitment to God that I keep trying to have, and this dedication to the Christians in the church that I keep trying to have. Maybe I should just call it, And so we look at these people and we see the highlights of their lives. We see the best moments. We see God delivering them through these, huge trials, these trials that, we continue to tell stories about, these trials that, from the very moment that a child is born, right? What are the stories that they're gonna know? David and Goliath, Daniel in the lion's den, right? These. Sorry, your eyebrows.
No, I was waiting for you to say the names in the fiery furnace.
No, these people who got thrown into the fiery furnace, these trials that we read about and these great victories, but you don't read about the day in and day out how hard that would have been. And that's, I guess, what, I think about the most is as I go through life, it's not these great trials and these major victories. It's just day in, day out doing the right thing and how hard that can be sometimes. And I think that's the lesson that I take away is in the good times and in the times that, the times that not life defining, but in the times that people are going to talk about the most, those are hard, but day in, day out might be just as hard.
What made these four men able to have the great moments that we see here was their dedication to God, not in those moments, but every single day.
Yeah.
Right. I love something I thought about as I've gotten older is, so many people say they're willing to die for God, but so little people are willing to live for him.
Yeah.
Right. Every day to choose. They'll say, I'll die for God. But when you look at their life, there's really no evidence of them living for God. Right. They're not willing to put the little distractions, the little sins aside. Right. And if you can't do the little things, then you have no right to say that we're going to do the big things. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think Daniel and Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego, their Babylonian names, if you'll forgive me.
Azariah, Mishael, and Hananiah.
Thank you. I think when you see those four people, right, the reason that they were able to have these great displays of faith was the little ones they showed all along the way.
Yeah.
Right. And I hope that, and I think sometimes we get too wrapped up in the big moments, like you said, in these life-defining moments of faith. Right. But if you haven't been faithful in the little things, then God has no reason to deliver you when times get hard. Right, I can't call out to God and say, God, deliver me through this really hard time if I haven't been faithful to Him every single day. Right, so I think it's something to remember and look at Daniel as an example of as we go throughout our regular lives.
Landon, can I read these last few verses and then can you close us out, please?
That's great because I was about to say I had a comment and I forgot what it was. So
I'm sorry.
No, it was like a long time ago. Like it was like right when we read the verses. I was like, hey, no, that'd be good to say. Now. So yeah, let's just move on.
All right, we're picking up in verse 18. Now, the end of the days, when the king had said that they should be brought in, the chief of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. Then the king interviewed them, and among them all, none was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore, they served before the king. And in all matters of wisdom and understanding about which the king examined them, he found them 10 times better than all of the magicians and astrologers who were in all of his realm. Thus Daniel continued until the first year of King Cyrus. And, I guess I never thought about that. King Cyrus, that was, again, like you said, like 70 years away. King Cyrus wasn't even king of the Chaldeans. He was king of the... He was king of the Medes and the Persians. Yeah, the Medes and Persians. Daniel served until a whole other empire came in and took Babylon.
Wiped out Babylon.
Yeah.
And then talked to them.
Yeah, and then he served them.
Yeah.
You had to be a smart guy because, like, when you read about like guys conquer lands, it's like anybody that had any kind of position, dead.
They killed.
I don't know how he knew to save Daniel. I don't know if it was just he had heard
word of
about
mouth.
it.
You think like, hey, there's
Surely.
this,
Surely.
this astrologer.
Hey, don't. Yeah,
There's
like,
this wise guy.
you kind of wonder if King Cyrus is coming
do
in,
not kill him.
or when King Darius, because King Cyrus wasn't even the first king that came in. King Darius was the first king that came in.
I think King Cyrus was the king, and Darius was set up as a. Oh man, we're getting into a lot here at the end of the podcast, but I'm pretty sure
Darius was not the king, but under the king.
Yeah,
okay.
he was kind of like the guy holding the throne, if you will.
Okay, the guy in the chair.
Yeah, no,
that's not how that phrase. Never mind. But anyway, like this idea of
technically Daniel was like the guy in the chair.
He was. You wonder though if like King Cyrus is coming in, like hey, y'all go through the palace, whatever.
I mean, you kill the king.
Do not, but
sons.
don't touch Daniel.
You don't. Touch
okay, there's something about Daniel, and think about like when a head coach in football gets fired, right? What happens? Well, a lot of his staff goes, except the really good ones. Right, you keep why do you keep the really good like coordinators on your team?
You're the Baltimore Ravens.
Ooh, a little Ravens fan. Yeah, wow.
Sorry,
yeah, well, hey, Well, I don't want to get into the NFL on the podcast, but why do you keep them? Well, because I mean they're really good at what they do, and they've proven themselves over and over again. Landon, stop giving me that sad look. Why would you keep Daniel? Because he has proven himself, and over and over again, he's proven that he is so wise, right? And even now before all of this happens, he is 10 times wiser than the magicians and the astrologers who had come before them. And so what an example Daniel is, and what a lesson Daniel is. Landon, would you wrap up the podcast for us, please?
I want to close it by kind of giving this ending through I think 4 people's perspectives. I want to start with this head eunuch. Okay, he's a guy whose literal job was to take these guys. I'm sure a lot of them were rebellious and angry and mean and had spite towards him because of what he was about to be involved in the process of breaking down who they were. Okay, and so he's probably seen a lot of things. He's probably heard a lot of things. He's probably dealt with a lot of nasty people and just nasty attitudes. Even from the guys that were from Judah, I'm sure a lot of them were rather rebellious in certain areas. Maybe not as much as one might think because they were scared of dying. But I'm sure he dealt with some things. He saw a lot of things. And what he saw at the end of the day was these 4 guys. And the miraculous side away of that he was feeding these guys vegetables and they were drinking water and they ended up yoked in comparison to everyone else. And I'm sure he was that's ridiculous. But all of that aside, that he found they found favor in his eyes. That he saw guys that would not compromise on their morals when everything was stripped away. Their family, their wealth. We don't know where they fell in line. We don't know if these were the nobleman's sons. We don't know. Most likely these were not the king's sons. But we don't know if these were nobleman's sons. We don't know where they fell into the political line of Judah. We know where they fell in as far as logic and wisdom was concerned. These were smart young men. But they did not waver on the things that mattered, no matter what situation they were put in. And you see that affect his life. And I wonder when he brought them into the king, if he knew in the back of his mind that in the years to come, I'll be answering to those guys. And that he was okay with that because he knew what they were capable of in a good way. Okay, then you take it from another perspective. All right, you take this from King Nebuchadnezzar, and this is really what you see in the verses. At the end of the days, the king brought them in. Okay, you have the chief of the eunuchs. You've seen his perspective and what he's handing off, these guys that he's crafted. I mean, he is the one that molded them into who they are. And so in a way, it's like his sons that he's handing off. And, he's watching them do this great thing. They're going before the king, and now you have the king bringing them in. Okay, now he sees these guys, and I'm sure although these are noblemen's sons and wise guys, there's probably some of them that were kind of duds. Okay, that
probably, yeah.
I mean, and you have some of them that did not look. They look maybe more sickly because they weren't eating their food, because they were scared, or because they were sick. And maybe you had some that really, they might have been a nobleman's son, but they were rather dumb, and they weren't really going to accomplish what he needed them to accomplish because there was a certain characteristic lines, and if you only had 2, you weren't getting in. You needed all of them. And I'm sure he was sifting through this. I'm sure he was getting sick of doing it. And you have these 4 guys come in, and I'm sure he probably heard about these guys that were eating broccoli and drinking water instead of drinking his wine. And then I'm sure he was probably frustrated, but then found out that it worked out for him. And maybe naturals, that's the way to go for some people. And so he has them come in, and he starts quizzing these guys. It's this interview. He's like, tell me about this. Give me the information on this. And everything that he could give them. I'm sure he was trying to look for an area of weakness, just so there's somewhere to grow, but he couldn't find it. They just turned out to be 10 times smarter than the guys that he would usually go to for things.
10 times smarter than the best of the best.
The best of the best. Mm-hmm. And so he goes, okay. And we know what happens to them, the power that they're giving, specifically Daniel. But the other guys too, Hananiah, Azariah, Mishael.
There it is.
I think we're dialing in.
That they get. Okay, well, we cut that off because that's the end of the chapter. That's what he sees. It puts them in power because of where they're at. Okay, and I take this from the guy's perspective. We don't know how this was going to work out. We're going to disobey the king. We're going to disobey the eunuch because we're going to follow what we believe is right, what we believe God wants us to do. We're going to do what God would have us to do. We're not going to compromise on our morals because there's some things that can't be compromised on. We don't care what's going to happen to us because of that. And eventually they get blessed with that, and that they ate the food and they grew more and they had more strength. But furthermore, then God blesses them not only with that, he gives them skill in all literature and wisdom and knowledge. And then Daniel has understanding of all visions and dreams. And so they keep getting these blessings. And so there's a solidifying of the faith that they already had, and that they know that we trusted God and God did what we knew he could do. We didn't necessarily expect him to do it, Almost did it. Hananiah, Azariah, Mishael. They didn't expect to be thrown in the furnace and like God is going to bring us back because He's going to do that. They knew God had the ability to do that, and they would trust that He would do what is best. If that meant they burned to a crisp in the furnace, then we burned to a crisp in a furnace. Here, if that means the king has us executed because we didn't know what we were supposed to do, that's fine. We're going to trust God. Now they were blessed. Same is true for us today. Now that might not mean that when you eat broccoli and celery and carrots and drink water that you're going to get huge or that you're just going to instantly wake up one morning and be incredibly smart in British literature. Okay, that's not necessarily true, but God will bless. Yeah, thank goodness. God will bless you more so spiritually. Okay, when you read the New Testament, the only thing that Jesus promised, and this is a scary reality to some, but it shouldn't be. The only thing Jesus promised Christians on the earth today is that you will have persecution. That's the only thing that He promised.
Yeah.
Now, He promised that there would be things to come in the next life that you would have. But on this is life, that's the only thing. And then as I close, the last thing, you want to look at this from God's perspective. Okay, He's been watching the people of Israel go up and down through the judges, through the kings. He's watched Israel absolutely fall. I know where I'm at, so we can break.
What? Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
He's watched Israel absolutely fall more than once. Okay, He's absolutely watched Israel get taken out by Assyria because of their disobedience. And then He watches Judah, and He says, you know what, it's time. They're going to get wiped out. Okay, what He's used to seeing is mediocrity in His people. And so now He's ready and He watches these 4 guys and He sees them go into a land that isn't theirs, stripped from their family, stripped from everything they've known, and then watched as men try to strip their identity and their morals from them. And He watches, what are they going to do? Are they going to obey Me, or are they going to do what everyone else did, what their friends did, maybe what siblings did that were there? Are they going to crumble too? And He had to watch that. Now, God being an all-knowing God knew what they would eventually do, but He also still watches the present. And so He sees, He knows what they're going to do, but He also knows what they could do. And so here He's watching as they obey Him and they turn down the food no matter what's going to happen. And what you see is God watched it. I think sometimes we have this idea that, I'm going to do the right thing, but, God's not really watching. I'm just going to do it because I know I need to. God's watching. And we always bring up God's watching when something bad's happening. Like you shouldn't do that because if no one else is watching, God still is. That's equally true when the good thing happens. God was sitting there and He watched those 4 guys saying, we don't want this. Would you bring us vegetables and water? He watched as those 3 guys stood before the king and said, we're not going to bow down to that idol, and so you just go ahead and get done what you're eventually going to do. You throw us in there. If God saves us, then He saves us, and if He doesn't, He doesn't. And God sat there and He watched that. Now He also watched everyone else bow down. And so God sees both of those things. And so when you're tempted to do something, remember God's watching. But don't just remember that so you don't do the bad thing. Remember that when you choose to do the right thing and no one else does, or everyone is encouraging you not to, or even when really no one else has a say in it and it's you just fighting within yourself to do the right thing, God is watching and God is waiting for you to do the right thing because that's what He wants. He wants to be able to say you did the right thing and wants to bless you for that.
Absolutely.
I agree. And what else can I add? We want to thank you guys for listening to this podcast about Daniel and Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah.
Look at us.
I think I have it dialed in now. And now I can judgmentally look down my nose at people. Oh, you called them. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Well, no, I'm just kidding. But thank you guys for listening to this podcast. Again, we just hope that you'll support it in any way that you can. And just comment any ideas that you have, whether they be YouTube video ideas, whether they be podcast topic ideas, whether they be constructive feedback. Make it nice though, because please try not to hurt my feelings. But thank you guys again. Yeah, but thank you guys again, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.